The convergence station orbited a perfectly average yellow star in a perfectly average sector of space, which made it the ideal location for the annual symposium of juvenile cognitive development across species. This was, essentially, a very fancy way of saying that every civilization in the local cluster sent their brightest educational minds to argue about how children should be taught, what children should learn, and why their particular species had definitively solved the puzzle of adolescent development, while everyone else was doing it wrong. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, which was diplomatically generous language for compromised into ugliness by committee. 7 different architectural styles clashed in a symphony of structural disagreement, held together by the mathematical genius of the Vexnari engineers, who had somehow made it all work despite the design violating at least 40 known principles of physics and aesthetic sensibility. It gleamed in the light of its host star, all crystalline towers and flowing curves, dotted with gardens that supported 17 different atmospheric compositions because nobody could agree on what constituted pleasant landscaping. Inside Conference Hall Theta 9, which had been climate-controlled to a temperature that made everyone equally uncomfortable as a gesture of fairness, 247 beings from 63 different worlds sat in carefully arranged seating pods. Each pod was customized to its occupant's physiology, which meant the room looked less like an auditorium and more like an avant-garde sculpture exhibit that had gained sentience and decided to host a meeting. Ambassador Krelvax of the Harmonious Collective adjusted his sensory fronds, which were wilting slightly in what he considered excessive heat. 22 degrees Celsius. Barbaric. His people had evolved on a moon where water existed primarily as a theoretical concept discussed in philosophy classes, and he found this humidity positively swampy. Still, duty called, and as the chairman of this year's symposium, he had responsibilities that transcended mere physical comfort. Distinguished colleagues, he began, his translator converting his chemical signals into standardized galactic common. We gather today to discuss the future of juvenile education across our civilizations. We stand united in our commitment to nurturing the next generation of... Are we going to actually discuss anything useful? Or is this another year of the crystalline hierarchy explaining why their meditation-based learning is superior? This interruption came from Professor Thexelin, a Quarix whose exoskeleton was currently displaying colors that translated roughly to professionally irritated. The representative from the crystalline hierarchy bristled, which was impressive considering they didn't have bristles. Our methods have produced a 97% satisfaction rate among pupils. Yes, because you selectively breed your children to enjoy meditation. That's not pedagogy, that's genetic cheating. Krelvax released a pheromone that meant, "Please, not this again," and was about to restore order when his assistant, a fluttering Mothric named Zix, whispered urgently near his audio receptors. "Sir, we have a situation." Define situation in a way that doesn't raise my stress enzymes. The human exchange student has arrived. Every sensory organ Krelvax possessed focused on his assistant. The what has what now? Human, from Earth, the Deathworld. She's part of the new integration initiative. Category 12 planets, sir. The paperwork was filed 6 lunar cycles ago. Category 12. Krelvax felt his stress enzymes rise despite his explicit instructions to them not to. Category 12 meant a planet where the dominant species had clawed its way to sentience through an obstacle course of extinction events, predators, diseases, and environmental hazards that would make other worlds classified as challenging look like meditation retreats. These were worlds where evolution hadn't just been a process, but a brutal competitive sport with no second-place prizes. Nobody told me. The bureaucracy department assumed someone else had informed you. The bureaucracy department always assumes someone else has handled everything. That's why nothing ever gets handled. Krelvax watched through the hall's transparent sections as a small figure approached down the corridor. How bad can it be? She's just one juvenile. They're always less intense than the adults. This was, as future events would prove, optimism of a level that bordered on delusional. The door to Conference Hall Theta 9 opened with a soft hiss, and every conversation in the room died as if someone had activated a silence field. She walked in with the casual confidence of someone who had no idea she was the most dangerous thing in the room. Bipedal locomotion, a method of movement that Krelvax found inherently unstable. Two forward-facing predator eyes that tracked movement with unsettling precision. A mouth that revealed flat teeth when she smiled. Though Krelvax knew from the briefings that humans also possessed sharp, tearing teeth hidden further back. Deceptive, omnivore design. She wore what the humans apparently considered appropriate attire for a juvenile. A pleated garment in dark blue, a white upper covering, and a decorative strip of fabric around her neck that served no protective purpose whatsoever. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a style that was probably meant to be neat, but several strands had escaped, suggesting either poor grooming habits or that human hair was actively rebellious. She carried a bag over one shoulder that looked heavy enough to require anti-grav assistance. But she moved as if it weighed nothing. "Hello?" Her voice was bright, cheerful, and carried across the room with the kind of projection that suggested her species had evolved to communicate over the sounds of dangerous weather or fleeing prey animals. "I'm so sorry I'm late. The transportation hub had an issue with atmospheric processing, and I had to wait for them to fix it. Though, honestly, it wasn't that bad. Just a little low on oxygen. Nothing serious." A little low on oxygen. Nothing serious. Krelvax watched as several attendees checked their own atmospheric monitors to confirm their oxygen levels were adequate. The Whisper Collective's representative actually fainted, though in fairness, they fainted at most social gatherings. "Welcome," Krelvax managed, his translator probably not capturing the full complexity of his nervous biochemical state. "You must be our exchange student from the Sol system. We're honored to have you participate in our symposium." "Oh, I'm honored to be here. I've never been off Earth before. Well, except for the moon. But that doesn't really count, does it? That's basically just Earth's backyard." She walked further into the room, and Krelvax noticed that several beings in the front rows leaned away from her path. "I've been studying all about your civilizations. It's fascinating how you've all developed education systems that work with your biologies. On Earth, we sort of just force everyone through the same system and hope for the best, you know?" She laughed. It was probably meant to be disarming. Instead, it reminded Krelvax of recordings he'd heard of Earth's apex predators vocalizing before a hunt. The fact that she was clearly trying to be friendly somehow made it worse. "Please, take a seat." Krelvax gestured to an empty pod that had been hastily reconfigured for human physiology. "Thank you." She moved toward it, then paused. "Oh, is it okay if I open a window? It's a bit stuffy in here." Stuffy. The temperature was carefully calibrated. Krelvax checked his environmental readout. 22 degrees Celsius, 60% humidity. Perfect comfort range for approximately 90% of attendees. That is within standard comfortable parameters for most species. Professor Thexelin offered diplomatically. "Oh, sure, it's fine. I'm just used to warmer. Back home, my classroom doesn't have climate control, so in summer it gets up to like 35 degrees. You just get used to it." She said this as if she hadn't just described conditions that would hospitalize most of the beings in the room. But really, this is totally comfortable. I'm just being picky. She sat down in her pod, which groaned slightly under her mass. Humans, despite their relatively modest size, had bone density and muscle structure that was frankly excessive by most standards. It was what happened when a species evolved under heavy gravity on a world that actively tried to kill them daily. They were built like they expected the universe to personally attack them at any moment. And on Earth, that was apparently a reasonable expectation. She began unpacking her bag, pulling out items that caused a ripple of concern around the room. First came a bound collection of cellulose sheets, primitive but harmless enough. Then she pulled out a writing implement. It appeared to be metallic, with a sharp point. Several security monitors in the room flagged it as a potential weapon. Technically, anything was a weapon to a human, but this one looked purpose-built for piercing. "What is that instrument?" asked Dr. Velmara, a soft mind who communicated through bioluminescent pulses. "Oh, this? It's just a pen. For writing." She clicked it, and the sharp point extended further. "I prefer these over the digital tablets. There's something about physically writing that helps me remember things better. Plus, if the power goes out, I can still take notes." If the power goes out. As if that was a common concern. As if educational facilities regularly experience catastrophic system failures that required backup analog technology. What kind of world did she come from where that was a normalized contingency plan? Krelvax was beginning to understand. "Perhaps we should begin the day's discussions," he suggested, hoping to establish some normalcy. Today's topic is stress management in educational environments. How do we create learning spaces that minimize anxiety for developing minds? "Oh, that's such an important topic." The human leaned forward with evident interest. "At my school, we have counselors for students who are dealing with stress. Though honestly, I think the best stress relief is just physical activity. When I'm anxious about exams, I usually go for a run, like 10 kilometers or so. Really clears your head. 10 kilometers. For recreation. That seems extensive," observed Krelvax carefully. "Oh, that's nothing. Some people do marathons. That's 42 kilometers. My friend did one last month. Said it was exhausting but fun." She smiled again, apparently not noticing that fun and exhausting were contradictory concepts to most species present. "Though I prefer swimming. There's a lake near my house. The water's pretty cold, even in summer, maybe 15 degrees. But once you get moving, you warm up quick. 15 degrees Celsius. Voluntary submersion in liquid at 15 degrees Celsius. For pleasure." The Harmonious Collective had a saying: "Judge a species not by their technology, but by what they consider relaxation." By that measure, humans were clearly insane. The symposium continued, though continued was generous. It was more accurate to say it limped forward like a wounded creature, interrupted every few minutes by some casual revelation from their human visitor that recontextualized everything everyone thought they knew about survivability. They discussed nutrition. She mentioned that her favorite food was spicy curry, which apparently involved chemical compounds that triggered pain receptors. But humans had decided this was enjoyable and built entire culinary traditions around it. "The spicier, the better," she said, cheerfully, while the Vexnari representative quietly updated their species' threat assessment of humanity. They discussed physical education. She explained dodgeball, a game where juveniles threw projectiles at each other at high velocity, and the objective was not to get hit. This was considered appropriate entertainment for children. The alternative, she mentioned, rugby, seemed to be organized warfare without the courtesy of declaring it as such. They discussed literature. Apparently, human juveniles were assigned to read stories about war, death, tragedy, and moral complexity. Last year we read this book about a dystopian society where the children had to fight to the death on television, she explained. Really makes you think about media and social control, you know? No. Krelvax did not know. He did not want to know. He wanted to unknow. Lunchtime arrived like a rescue shuttle. The cafeteria was another compromise space, offering cuisine from multiple worlds arranged in careful sections to prevent cross-contamination. Krelvax had been looking forward to his nutrient suspension, but found his appetite diminished by curiosity and dread as he watched the human navigate the food stations. She walked past the crystalline hierarchy's light synthesis station, past the Quarix's mineral supplements, past the carefully pH-balanced solutions the soft minds consumed. She stopped at a section that most attendees avoided, where some experimental Earth-compatible options had been prepared by chefs who had never actually met a human and were working from chemical composition databases. "Oh, wow, you have coffee." Her excitement was genuine and somehow made everything worse. "I haven't had coffee in 3 days. I was getting a headache." "Caffeine withdrawal," Dr. Velmara observed, her bioluminescence flickering with concern. "A toxic dependence your species has developed to a plant-based stimulant." "Well, I mean, when you put it that way, it sounds bad." She poured a dark liquid that Krelvax's scanner identified as containing compounds that would require medical intervention for most species. "But, yeah, basically. We drink it to stay awake, especially students. During exam week, I probably have like 6 cups a day. 6 doses of a chemical stimulant, daily, as a voluntary routine." She also selected items that appeared to be preserved through the application of thermal energy, some synthesized plant matter, and a fruit that was notable for its acidic properties. Then she joined Krelvax at his table, apparently oblivious to the fact that he had been trying to project "do not approach" through every biochemical signal at his disposal. "This symposium is really interesting," she said between bites of her thermally damaged nutrition. "At home, we never really think about how different species might learn differently. We barely account for different learning styles within our own species. Your educational system treats all human juveniles identically?" Krelvax asked, finding this genuinely curious. "Pretty much. I mean, there are some accommodations for disabilities, but generally, everyone sits in the same classroom, gets the same lessons, takes the same tests. It's not perfect, but..." She shrugged, a gesture that seemed to be a physical manifestation of acceptance of imperfection. "We make it work." Making it work. That seemed to be humanity's approach to everything. The universe presented them with problems, and rather than engineering elegant solutions, they simply endured, adapted, and called it normal. The afternoon session focused on safety protocols in educational environments, which turned out to be the most accidentally comedic portion of the day. Professor Thexelin presented the Quarix approach, which involved extensive padding, rounded corners on all furniture, air filtration systems that removed 99% of potential allergens, and constant medical monitoring of all students. "We believe that a safe learning environment is fundamental to proper development," Thexelin explained, her exoskeleton colors shifting to proud amber. "Our injury rate in educational facilities is effectively 0. "That's wonderful," the human said, and seemed to genuinely mean it. "Very different from home, though. My school had a total of 43 injuries last year requiring medical attention." The room went silent. 43, Krelvax repeated. "In one educational facility? In one solar cycle?" "Well, yeah. Most were pretty minor. Sprains, broken bones, concussions. Nothing too serious. Broken bones. Minor. These words in the same thought structure. How did these injuries occur? Dr. Velmara's lights were pulsing with what was either fascination or horror, possibly both. Oh, sports mostly. We had 2 fractures during football season, 1 during basketball. Someone broke their arm falling downstairs. A few people got hurt in chemistry class when an experiment went wrong. Oh, and there was that incident in woodworking class. But everyone agreed that was kind of impressive, actually. Woodworking class. They gave juveniles tools designed to cut wood, which implied sharp implements and force, for educational purposes. And this is considered acceptable? Thexelin's colors had shifted to confused purple. I mean, accidents happen, right? Can't wrap everyone in bubble wrap? She laughed again. Though some parents want to. We call them helicopter parents. They hover over their kids constantly, trying to prevent any possible harm. The fact that this was considered overprotective rather than baseline reasonable parenting revealed volumes about human risk assessment. The conversation drifted to other safety topics. Emergency procedures, evacuation protocols, disaster preparedness. We do earthquake drills at my school, the human mentioned casually. Once a month. Everyone gets under their desks and holds on until the shaking stops. Shaking? Krelvax's translator seemed to be malfunctioning. Your planet's surface shakes? Oh yeah, we're on a fault line. Get tremors pretty regularly. Nothing serious usually, but you have to be prepared for the big one. She said the big one the way someone might reference a predictable holiday. We also do fire drills and active shooter drills, though those are pretty controversial. Active shooter drills. Krelvax decided he didn't want to know. Some knowledge was too dangerous to possess. Then the emergency alarms started blaring. Later, Krelvax would reflect that the universe had a terrible sense of timing and possibly a cruel sense of humor. The automated system's voice echoed through the conference hall with the calm that only artificial intelligence could maintain during a crisis. Hull breach detected in Section 7. Atmospheric pressure dropping. All personnel evacuate to designated safe zones. This is not a drill. The effect was immediate. The soft minds began their emergency consensus formation, which involved a lot of frantic flashing but very little actual movement. The crystalline hierarchy representatives entered meditative stasis, which was apparently their species' response to danger. The Quarix were attempting to flee through a door that only opened in the other direction. It was chaos, but the slow, uncertain kind of chaos exhibited by species who had never actually had to deal with chaos. Krelvax felt his decision-making biochemistry lock up. Evacuate. Yes, that was the logical choice. But evacuate where? What was the protocol? He'd attended the safety briefing, but that had been 6 lunar cycles ago, and he'd spent most of it thinking about lunch. Okay, everyone needs to calm down. The human's voice cut through the panic with startling clarity. She'd stood up, and there was something different about her posture now. Less casual, more focused. Where's the breach? Section 7, Krelvax managed. 3 corridors away. Which way is the safe zone? Opposite direction? Through the main corridor. Right. Anyone here unable to move quickly? She was already scanning the room, those predator eyes assessing, calculating. When no one answered immediately, she raised her voice. I need to know now. Anyone injured, impaired, or unable to evacuate independently? The Whisper Collective's representative was still unconscious from fainting earlier. 2 soft minds were too panicked to coordinate movement. A Vexenari elder was struggling with their mobility apparatus. The human didn't hesitate. She moved to the Whisper Collective representative first, and Krelvax watched in astonishment as she simply picked them up, lifted another sapient being like they were a piece of luggage. The Whisper Collective species weren't heavy by human standards, apparently, but the casual display of strength was shocking. "You two," she pointed at a pair of younger Quarks, "help the soft minds coordinate. They need to agree on moving together. Talk them through it." Her voice had authority that made people follow instructions before consciously deciding to comply. "You," she indicated Professor Thexelin, "help the elder with their apparatus. Everyone else, orderly line, move toward the exit. Don't run. Running causes congestion." She was giving orders to beings decades or centuries older than her, accomplished academics and diplomats. And somehow it worked. Everyone moved. Krelvax found himself shepherding people toward the door, following this juvenile Deathworlder's crisis management without question. Through the transparent sections, he could see atmosphere venting into space from Section 7, a plume of crystallizing moisture. "Is the door sealed?" the human called out, still carrying the unconscious Whisper Collective representative. "Automatic bulkheads should have engaged," Krelvax replied. "Should have?" "We designed extensive redundancies into our safety systems. The probability of failure is a secondary alarm, the kind that meant the improbable had occurred. Bulkhead failure in Section 6. Breach spreading. Estimate 5 minutes until Conference Hall Theta 9 loses atmospheric integrity." 5 minutes. The evacuation was moving too slowly. Too many people, too narrow a corridor, too much confusion. They weren't going to make it. The human's jaw set in a way that Krelvax recognized from nature documentaries about predators deciding to fight rather than flee. "Change of plans. Is there any way to seal this section independently?" "The manual override," Zix offered, fluttering nervously. "But it's on the other side of the breach corridor. You'd have to go toward the danger and the atmospheric pressure. How much oxygen do I have to work with?" "At current pressure loss rates, approximately 3 minutes of breathable atmosphere in the corridor. Less if you're exerting yourself." "Great. Which way?" Krelvax's mind caught up with what she was suggesting. "You cannot possibly." "I can hold my breath for 2 minutes. Did freediving lessons at summer camp. Hated it at the time, really grateful for it now." She was already moving, setting down the Whisper Collective representative gently near the door. "Get everyone out, I'll buy you time." "The pressure differential will..." "Yeah, it's going to suck. Literally." She flashed a grin that was probably meant to be reassuring, but mainly emphasized her disturbing dentition. "But I've got this. Deathworld beast, remember?" And then she ran toward the breach. Krelvax had seen many things in his career. He'd witnessed the formation of star systems in laboratory simulations. He'd studied the complex social structures of 40 different civilizations. He'd once had a very uncomfortable conversation with a crystalline hierarchy priest about the nature of consciousness. None of it prepared him for watching a human juvenile sprint into a corridor that was actively venting atmosphere into space. She moved fast. Faster than should have been possible in those impractical garments and the gravity conditions. Her species evolved physiology, designed for pursuit hunting across vast distances, translated into burst speed that covered the corridor length in seconds. The atmospheric pressure was dropping. Krelvax could see the moisture in the air beginning to crystallize, could see her breath misting. She should have been stopping, should have been collapsing from hypoxia, should have been doing any of the things that would happen to a reasonable species in those conditions. Instead, she reached the manual override panel, grabbed it with both hands, and pulled. Nothing happened. She pulled again, muscles straining against a mechanism designed to be operated by mechanical assistance. The metal bent. Actually bent. The override engaged with a screech of tortured metal, and the emergency bulkhead began its slow descent from the ceiling. But she was on the wrong side. "No," Krelvax heard himself say. "No, no, no." The human looked back at them through the narrowing gap, and she was smiling. Actually smiling. Then she dropped to the floor and rolled, sliding under the descending bulkhead with centimeters to spare, landing in a tumble on their side as it sealed with a definitive thunk. She lay there for a moment, breathing hard, then sat up and gave a shaky thumbs-up gesture that Krelvax's cultural database informed him was a sign of success among humans. "Told you. Summer camp." The evacuation continued. Everyone made it to the safe zone. The station's maintenance drones sealed the breach. Life support systems stabilized. Emergency was downgraded to incident, was downgraded to unfortunate occurrence, was downgraded to interesting story for later. In the aftermath, Krelvax found himself in the medical bay with the human, who was being checked over by a soft-mind physician who kept flickering in confused colors. "Your cardiovascular system is very loud," the physician observed. "Is this normal?" "I mean, I just ran through a decompressing corridor and pulled apart a metal panel with my bare hands, so my heart rate's a bit elevated. But yeah, basically normal." She was remarkably calm for someone who'd nearly been vented into space. "Anything broken?" "Several of your exterior dermal layers are damaged, what you would call bruising, and your muscle tissue shows signs of strain. I recommend rest and..." "Got it. Take it easy for a day or two." "Can I go? I want to catch the evening session on standardized testing methodologies." The physician's lights dimmed in what might have been disbelief. "You nearly died." "Sure, but I didn't. That's the important part." She hopped off the examination platform. "Besides, this was nothing compared to when I got caught in a riptide during a school trip. Now that was scary." She left, just walked out, presumably to attend a lecture on assessment metrics. Krelvax stared after her. "What's a riptide?" The physician's lights flashed through several confused colors. "I believe it's a phenomenon where Earth's oceans attempt to drown people. The humans swim in them anyway." "Of course they do." That evening, the symposium concluded with closing remarks that Krelvax barely remembered delivering. Something about cooperation, shared knowledge, and the value of diverse perspectives. The words felt hollow after the day's events. The human approached him afterward, bag slung over her shoulder, that same cheerful expression on her face. "Thank you so much for having me. This was incredible. I learned so much about how different species approach education. It's really going to help with my comparative xenopedagogy thesis." "It was enlightening to have you," Krelvax managed. "Though perhaps you should mention to future hosts that human capabilities are somewhat beyond standard parameters." "Oh, was I too much?" "I worried about that. My mom always says I can be a bit intense." She laughed, apparently not recognizing that intense was a catastrophic understatement. "But everyone here was so nice. And honestly, the emergency was kind of fun. Gets the adrenaline going, you know." Fun. She'd found nearly being killed by space fun. Do all humans view mortal danger as entertainment? What? No, of course not. She paused. Well, I mean, sort of. We have entire industries built around simulating danger safely. Roller coasters, haunted houses, extreme sports. Some people jump out of aircraft with just a parachute for fun. Oh, and there's this thing called cave diving where you... Please, Krelvax interrupted. Please, I don't need to know. She smiled, and this time it seemed warmer, more genuine. I get it. We're weird. But weird is just another word for different, right? And different is what makes the universe interesting. She had a point. A terrifying, uncomfortable point. But a point nonetheless. After she left, Krelvax sat in the empty conference hall, reviewing the day's recordings for his report. On screen, he watched the human sprint into danger, bend metal, and slide under a closing bulkhead like it was a routine inconvenience. He watched her give orders with natural authority, assess a crisis in seconds, and act without hesitation while beings with centuries more experience stood frozen. And he watched her laugh, smile, and treat the entire experience like it was just another day. Maybe that was the most terrifying thing about humans. Not their strength, not their resilience, not their ability to survive, what would kill most species. It was the fact that they genuinely didn't understand how remarkable they were. They'd been forged in such an unforgiving crucible that they thought it was normal. They walked through the universe like it was safe, comfortable, friendly, because compared to Earth, it was. They were Deathworld beasts who thought they were just regular students. Zix fluttered down beside him. Sir, I've been reviewing the Integration Initiative paperwork. There are 67 more human students scheduled for exchange programs across the sector. Krelvax released a biochemical sigh. Of course there are. Should I file a recommendation to modify the safety protocols? What safety protocols could possibly account for them? Krelvax gestured at the screen, where the human was frozen mid-sprint toward certain death with a smile on her face. They think danger is fun. They voluntarily throw themselves out of aircraft. They swim in oceans that try to drown them. They eat food that causes pain and call it delicious. What protocol addresses that? A strongly worded warning? Yes. Let's go with that. Krelvax began drafting the memo in his head. Attention all symposium hosts. Human exchange students represent a Category 12 species from a planet classified as a significant biological hazard. Despite their juvenile status and friendly demeanor, they possess physical capabilities, risk tolerance, and survival instincts far beyond standard parameters. Recommended precautions include... He paused. What precautions would even work? Perhaps just don't panic when they do something impossible? That seems insufficient. It's all we have, sir. Krelvax looked once more at the screen, at the frozen image of a young human who'd saved an entire conference hall full of academics who'd spent decades studying intelligence, learning, and development, only to be rescued by someone who considered running 10 kilometers a stress relief activity. The galaxy was going to have to adjust its understanding of many things: strength, resilience, danger. What constituted an acceptable level of risk? What was possible for biological organisms to survive? And perhaps most importantly, what could hide behind a cheerful smile and a school uniform? Because somewhere out there on a blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable star, millions more just like her were growing up, learning, preparing to walk into a galaxy that had no idea what was coming. They would call it integration, cultural exchange, peaceful cooperation. But Krelvax knew the truth. The Deathworld beasts were here. They looked like children. They smiled and laughed and thought 3 minutes without oxygen was a challenge instead of a death sentence. And they were absolutely terrifying. He filed his report, added the warnings, and made a note to request a long vacation. Somewhere quiet, somewhere boring, somewhere far, far away from any scheduled human visits. Then he noticed the next item on his agenda. Next month's symposium was being held on a collaborative space station. Joint hosting. Multiple species participating in the planning, including Earth. Krelvax released every stress pheromone at his disposal and wondered if it was too late to change careers. Perhaps he could become a hermit. Hermits didn't have to deal with humans. Hermits sat alone in caves and contemplated the universe without having to worry about Deathworld juveniles, treating mortal danger like a team-building exercise. Yes, hermit life was looking increasingly appealing. On the screen, the human's frozen smile seemed to follow him as he left, promising that no matter where he went in this galaxy, humanity was coming. And they thought it was going to be fun. The universe wasn't ready. Krelvax wasn't ready. Nobody was ready. But ready or not, the Deathworld beasts had arrived. And they'd done it wearing school uniforms. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.